Hey, I'm Sin Masterson, and I show men how to become unstuck, unshakable, and unstoppable. And in this video, I want to talk to you about conflict, specifically conflict with a woman. And to talk to you today, I came out on my driveway on my homestead in Pennsylvania to share with you a story. And it's a story about something that was driving me absolutely bonkers on my homestead. You see, I bought this property um, maybe a dozen or so years ago, and I moved in, was really excited about, owning acreage and the homesteading we would be doing. And the first spring that we were here, we moved in winter. One of my neighbors called after a huge downpour and said, "Hey, your driveway washed out into the road." And I was like, "What? Are you kidding?" So I went down to look, and you can see maybe behind me this hill back here. All of the stone here had washed down to the road and was in the road. It's about 20 tons of stone, which is a lot. And that meant I had to take the day off of work. We have 6 children and three boys, 3 girls. And my boys were all teenagers at the time. And so they took the day off of homeschool. And we spent all day shoveling stone back into like an ATV trailer and bringing it up and putting it back on to the driveway. It was exhausting work and not fun at all. I was self-employed, still am, so it meant a day off of work for me, no income, and it was just a big pile of frustration. And so you could imagine my sheer frustration when it happened again and again and again. And so, it didn't take me long to realize I needed a tractor, so I bought a tractor. And that made the job easier, but it still meant taking off, a lot of loss of time, lots of work. And I love work, but it was frustrating to have to rebuild the driveway every time we had a big downpour. And so my driveway was not a resilient driveway whatsoever. So I engaged professionals. I hired no less than 3 different excavating companies who all showed me very carefully why I needed all my ditches redone. Now I have about a third of a mile of driveway, and they redid the ditches. And the first time we did that, it washed out again. Second time, new company, washed out again. Third time, way more work, way more effort, way more excavating, washed out again. And by this time, I'm several years and tens of thousands of dollars that I really couldn't afford, put it in this driveway, trying to make this work. And then coming to realize it's not working. I still have to rebuild the freaking driveway every time we get a torrential downpour. What gives? What's going on? And I was just getting exasperated. And at this time in life, I was also experiencing a lot of exasperation in my marriage. In fact, the driveway is a really good metaphor for what was going on. I felt like every time conflict would come up in our family, specifically in our marriage, I felt like there was just a washout inside of me emotionally in our relationship. It felt like we would have these, some sort of big fight, big argument, and we would be disconnected and separate for weeks, lots of stonewalling and contempt and resentment, and just not the life I had imagined for myself. And if you're like me, you got married with this desire to start a family and to build a great life for yourself. I'd done everything right. I was not abusive. I was not mean. I didn't have vice. I was dedicated as a husband and father, and it just was not working out for me. And we'd have these conflicts and a total relationship washout. And I was frustrated. I was at the end of my rope, actually, when all this driveway stuff was going on. And so, interestingly, I had kind of a last ditch effort, no pun intended, to just say, before I completely bail out on this marriage, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a rather simple solution. Maybe I could find something else. And by happenstance, I came into contact with 2 different older, wiser men who helped me to see an entirely different perspective of my marriage. And like painfully simpler, to the point where I was like, it can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. And so I started to put into practice a few things, a new understanding. And what was difficult for me to understand was that it didn't require my wife to change or to do anything. Not for me to get past this conflict. And had you told me then, um, well, what I did learn then, I just didn't believe at first. But nevertheless, I started to practice a new way of doing things, a simpler way. And that simpler way was to stop focusing on trying to make my wife understand me, to be understood, stop trying to fix conflict, stop trying to fix, and to just focus on my own self and development, my own growth. And lo and behold, my marriage started to change. My life started to change. And I started to realize, this principle here about something just being simple, if you're willing to slow down and look at things a little differently, was starting to really mean something. Now, I realize I left you hanging with the driveway. And so I want to come back to that, because as I started to have this openness to new perspectives, I was having openness to lots of new perspectives, including stuff around my farm. And so I don't know if you can tell here, but right behind me is just a little list of dips right here. Okay. And that's called a swale. And that swale took me all of about 30 minutes to basically scrape back with my tractor. And I did that because I spent some time watching what was really happening when these downpours happened. And I noticed, okay, the water's coming down this farm lane right here behind me where my goats were. And it was circling this corner right here and just washing out the driveway. So I put this little tiny divot there. It's so imperceptible, you probably can't even see it on camera. It's that small. And what happens now is when the water comes down this lane, it hits that little swale and it goes into the ditch. And because of that, it doesn't round the corner. And all of the momentum and the sheer force of the water never makes it onto the driveway. No washout, no days off of work with lost income, no kids off school. And it's been good, that little bit of 30-minute work, for 6 years. 6 years it's been working, after tens of thousands of dollars of effort in re-excavating, all by professionals, trusted professionals, professionals with good reputations, people that are esteemed in my community. And, I don't have any critique for them. I believe they were really doing what looked like they should do. And it doesn't mean that the work was bad. It just wasn't effective. And so that 30 minutes and virtually no cost minus our diesel fuel, that fixed everything. And it happened by just being willing to see, maybe there's another way to look at things besides what experts say. Maybe there's just another way to go about this. And that has paid huge dividends for me. And so when I started to do that in my life, my marriage, my relationship, it allowed me to see things in an entirely new way, especially around conflict. I learned to inject myself into conflict way earlier, before the washout phase. And I learned to put little swales in the relationship. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, there's a lot I can unpack here, more so that I can get into in this video, but it looks like this. It looks like not being scared of the conflict to begin with. You see, I didn't know that I was being triggered, that I was having my own insecurities and fears and my own misperceptions about what's going on. And so that changed the dynamic of how I had been showing up in the relationship. And when I was willing to see things a little differently, to think about a swale, to think about getting involved earlier in the runoff, the emotional runoff of my wife, for example, and to know how to calmly avert the disaster of the washout by just directing the water in a way that it already wants to go. And so I started to seeing conflict entirely different. In fact, now I'm not scared of conflict in any way in my relationship. I not only am comfortable with it, I embrace it. You know why? Because it is the gateway to intimacy. And I'm not just talking about sex here, fellas. I'm talking about connection, closeness, because I don't see it as a thing to avoid, something I wish would stop happening. I see it as just a part of relationships, that when the woman in my life is having an emotional storm of some kind, a downpour, what she wants from me in that moment is my presence and my containing and my directing, not trying to fix her, but being a guy who feels comfortable, just shaping the flow of the water into an effective place that doesn't create a disaster, that doesn't wash things out, that doesn't create hours and hours and hours of backbreaking work, but just directs it in the way it wants to go. And so this has been so revolutionary to me that I have spent a lot of time talking to men about it, so much so that it ended my last career positively, because I was spending so much time telling men all over the world about how this was working for me, who were then doing it themselves and reporting similar results. And so I want to share more with you, and I realize a YouTube video is a very hard place to do that. So I've prepared a free seminar for anybody who wants to come. I do ask that you be a man, because this is directed at you men, not the women. And it's going to be 90 minutes. It's going to be on April 6th. That's a Sunday, I believe, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It's totally free, but you do need to register. Now, that seminar, I'm going to give you the highlights, the main big ideas of the understanding that turned things around for me. I'm not going to tell you everything in that seminar, because it's going to take me about 7 weeks of 90-minute sessions to really explain that. And I actually have that prepared for the people that want to go really deep. That's going to be a small group coaching experience. I do have to limit it, because it can't really be valuable to people unless there's a small enough group for men to participate in a way that's personal and real and authentic. And so this seminar on April 6th at 3 p.m. is going to just be the high level, because I believe you'll still get something out of it, even if you can't attend the deeper 7-week group cohort. I still want you to come, still get what you can out of it. There's no strings attached. There's no high pressure sales. I'm just going to show you what I've got to offer, invite you to join me if you want on that 7 weeks, and to see how it can totally radically turn your life around. And if that's not for you, hey, that's okay with me. So if you're interested, look in the description. Consider signing up. You have nothing to lose by coming. You're not going to get endless emails from me for the next rest of your life trying to get you to buy everything because you reached out to me one time. I'm going to invite you to something meaningful and show you what I know, and hope that you get something great out of it, and we're going to move on. I hope to see you there. Take care.